Well, welcome everyone. Let's see. I guess first up, any PRs people want to bring up?
I can talk about a little about pull requests I made a couple of days ago. It is still in draft. I am refactoring a little the event tables on Windows, so we can add batching support and include some additional tests. So yeah, I will soon have use for some code reviews.
Okay, do you need anything from us prior to that?
Actually, maybe Nick can help me out. I was looking into the causing similarity. I was wondering how it works. I couldn't find how to configure it. So, yeah.
Oh man, that sucks. I probably never documented that very well. What you do is you pass in a vector, so like a JSON blob that has the character frequencies for all 255 characters that you expect to see in PowerShell events, and it will do the cosine similarity differential for you. So like you configure it in your JSON blob, and it will compare what it's seeing against what you've given it.
Oh, I see.
So it's, yeah, you would imagine you have a corpus of PowerShell scripts that are like known good, known benign scripts. You would take all of those scripts and compute the frequency values, and each index in the array corresponds to the hex value of the character, right? So 0x41 would be capital A, and you would increment for the number of times you've seen it, but you divide it up by a percentage. So I think the sum total of all of the values should be 1, I believe. You pass that in, and as Osquery seeing PowerShell scripts come across, it will compute that same character frequency and compare it against that using cosine similarity.
Oh, I see. That's pretty cool.
It is cool, but I don't, now that you mention it, I think I never documented how to actually use it. We've had it internally for a long time, but no one ever used it. Except for me. I was the only one that used it, and I thought it was super neat, but no one gave a shit. So I will, I'll try, if I don't, I'm like, I'll take it as a to-do item, a follow-up to go and document how to use it. Because yeah, that sucked. We have like a feature that there's no support on how to use. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah. Is that specific to PowerShells? Or like where is that hanging?
Yeah, it's inside of the PowerShell table, the PowerShell events table. So it's very specific. But you could, were one so inclined, like you could abstract the logic and apply it to whatever you wanted to, right? The concept of cosine similarity analysis is very general. The problem is not very robust. So you should know in your head that if you're going to go and apply cosine similarity to something else, that like it is not foolproof. Like you should use it as one of many things that you consider.
I'm wondering, one, if there are other interesting use cases, and two, if you've ever seen interesting results come back from that.
I have. I think that was some of the stuff I gave a talk at Blue Hat on had some of the results of this cosine similarity analysis work. But like you could apply it to Python in particular, basically any scripted code that you would want. The problem is, how do you have to like find a way to get that pulled into Osquery. That's where things are difficult. Right, like there isn't really a good way to get Python transcript logs pulled into Osquery.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we'd almost need to. So I was thinking 90 degrees off from this. I was thinking a little bit about Bloom filters, because I frequently find myself wanting to say something like select items where item not in a Bloom filter, and that kind of has the same problem of how do you create the Bloom filters and ship them. And I almost sort of want to say, you know, maybe I want Osquery I to be able to say, here, take this directory of things, make a Bloom filter, take this directory of things, make a cosine count on them, right? So you sort of have to like, it's a little bit of a manual process of here's my corpus, generate my magic hash thing, and then I can put that into queries.
It's kind of one of those things that I think in hindsight, it probably should have been an extension. I don't really think I should have baked this into core, but I was moving fast. Like I think somebody else at I think Sam Healy mentioned being excited about it. Someone in the world had mentioned being excited about this cosine similarity stuff, but I don't remember who, and I don't know how actively people are
You
using
told us about it at the first QueryCon, I think, over drinks once. It was,
it. I
yeah.
remember that.
It was
I
mean,
like
interesting.
it. It was super cool, but I don't know if there's a lot of value coming out of it. So
It seems cool, and I sort of am just circling around like how would we use it and how could people use it? And like it's sort of again the split between you have to generate the corpus and then you have to like bake it into a query. So does that look like a pair of functions to like generate corpus with seed data and then another one of like saying give me the distance between these and you can do whatever you want with it. But like I don't know. It's like this whole little host of cosine similarity, Bloom filters, like other things all have that same pattern.
like kind of like just statistical analysis of data kind of a thing. Like you could make, again, it seems like there might be a place for an extension that just does all sorts of cool statistical analysis.
Maybe easier in core, honestly. I don't know, because a lot of this I suspect works better as SQL functions. And I don't like, can we add SQL functions in an extension?
Well, for this one in particular, I think the biggest reason I did it in core is because the math to do it is really, really simple. So doing it inline while you're recording PowerShell events was so easy.
Mm-hmm. That's probably true for almost everything statistical, though, because inherently, like the reason you want it is because the math is simple.
Yeah, like it's super easy math and you can do it very quickly, like inline.
I've been thinking about stuff like this ever since we started playing around with MDFine, because it's kind of similar where you have like a separate indexing like tool that can give you quick access to stuff that otherwise would be very slow and exporting it to a query. And other people have played around with like a DNS service and giving us query visibility into stuff that's computed asynchronously on a machine. And just indexing in a way where, you know, Osquery can just query and have an interface to that. So that all this stuff sounds kind of similar. Yeah, the extensions make more sense to me, but I don't know.
I would want it to be in an extension just due to the nature of like, this doesn't really seem like something everybody might necessarily want. It's very, above and beyond. The problem is, I think, getting the data into the extension to do the analysis, like that part's tricky. And so I don't know of a good way that you could do this uniformly for statistical plugins, right?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of go the other way, and I think that some classes of functions are fine in core, even if they're seldomly used, right? Like we talk about adding, numeric base conversions to core, and like that doesn't sound wrong to me. Like they're about enabling things. So I don't know. I guess it's a weakly held opinion right now. Whereas I think of
especially in my eyes, if these things can be added as SQL functions, I think it totally makes sense to be in core. And sure. I don't have a good grasp of this one, but is there? Do you see specific obstacles to implementing the cosine similarity thing within a SQL function? Is it like, do we need access to the data in a way that you wouldn't have at the SQL query time or something?
No, I think it could be a SQL function probably pretty easily. I can investigate that while I'm looking at the documentation. And like, I think that other major databases like Presto, I think some of these other things do have a cosine similarity function, like as their syntax, as opposed to having it like baked in somewhere else.
I'm a big believer in SQL functions, and I think that that there's a lot of potential for us to explore new SQL functions. I mean, we just added the community ID stuff, which I think is pretty awesome, and I think there's a lot more potential. So I'm totally into exploring that, and I don't really have a problem with adding such functionality to core. I mean, those functions are just there to be used if people want to use them, and they can be ignored if people don't.
That's kind of where I fall on that too. Anyhow, Alessandro, did you get your actual question about Windows batching answered?
Yeah,
Cool.
Yeah. It was just about this feature that I didn't know how to configure, and yeah, it's really cool. I think it is nice to have it.
And I guess if anyone feels like putting up PRs related to statistical functions, we can discuss the nuance there. But it sounds like at least several of us are on board with that. Like, I think it could be super cool. So.
Yeah. I think everyone would want to use it if they knew it was there, because it is really nice.
That's kind of one of the problems I wanted to bring up. Like, we should think about when we introduce features, like how to publicize them. Like, it's really cool. Osquery has a whole bunch of things, but then nobody knows about them. And we're like,
we used to have a pretty good cadence about doing blog posts on the site anytime we did releases, and you could use that as a stage to highlight stuff, and then we could have people retweet. That, I mean, in my eyes, that would be a good candidate, right? Like with every new release that we tag, maybe we could try to isolate one like big feature or something. So like with 4.2.0, we could have had a blog post kind of highlight a CVE and been like, hey, there's a CVE, everybody should be upgrading because this is sort of a big deal, and then retweet. Or like somebody drops some really awesome new feature, right? Maybe that can be part of our release process, Seth, is we can like think about trying to highlight one thing and write like a small brief paragraph about it. I don't know.
I think
yeah, I mean, I think that totally makes sense, and I've kind of been working on doing that on my own blog. And I mean, I think these things would totally make sense to post on the Osquery website. I guess the issue is, from my perspective, like I have to find clients so that I can keep doing this work and getting paid. And so it's like hard for me to put this content not on my own site. Although maybe we can find ways to share it across the Osquery site, or other people can get on board with doing similar things.
Zach, so 2 questions about that, I guess. One of them is, would you cross-publish?
Yeah, I think I would.
And the other one is I think Nick's suggestion. So my biggest concern is that if we hang like a write a blog post as like a to-do item on a release thing, that's going to be hard, right? Like I can cut releases, but I write very slowly.
Sure, but we do have a thing in the release notes that says publicize it. Well, like, it doesn't have to be anything formal. Like I think what Zach is talking about, like a cross-publish, that could be the publicize it, right? Or like a big Twitter campaign. Like I definitely agree with you, Seth. It doesn't have to. I agree that if we make it formal, that like, yeah, that's going to probably suck in the release steps. It's like, no, I got to go write a blog about something. But
I think your other suggestion of like pick a feature and like write a paragraph and like that's enough. Like that's actually a low bar, right? Like I feel like I could probably do that. It won't be real polished, but it doesn't need to be.
And again, it doesn't need to be you, right? Like I would really love it if the cadence of release notes, we kind of like take turns doing this, because it can be a drag, and it really can be rough doing this every time. So like it'd be great if, or you know, if in the Slack channel, somebody seems really excited about a feature, be like, hey, would you write a paragraph about this? Because we're going to highlight it in our next release notes. And then they get publicity, and we get publicity for Osquery, right? It's win-win.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of, you know, if we can make some of the blog stuff simpler, we can become, this thing's released, you know, here's some top line features that people wrote paragraphs about. And, you know, we don't even need to cross-publish. We can be like, here, go see someone else's blog for this beautiful write-up.
Sure.
So like,
the note of tagging the PR for highlight, I think that's a dangerous game, right? Because like we've had, like with the CVE that dropped, a lot of PRs ended up getting pushed to another release. So like I think it's a good idea. Like we could consider doing that, but I'd be careful with trying to tag a PR and say like, hey, we're going to highlight this in our release notes for the release.
I don't
work out.
Tag was not automated. I meant more like when you write it, you might pick a couple.
I was talking to the comment that I think Ben had.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even see it.
So, sorry. So to clarify, to clarify, what I mean by that is, if we put a tag on that PR, that's to hint to us near the end of the release that these are the features or these tickets that we probably want to highlight. So we think up front that we need to write a paragraph about it.
I was even thinking something more asking people, like if you're adding a new feature or making a big change within Osquery, like an action item for the pull request would be to update the documentation. Like not even we should have like more blog posts and like community contributions for getting the word out. But I think the documentation itself, like people tend to go and when they need something to look it up, and we've historically not been that great about updating it. So asking people on a pull request if they're making a change, like give some quick examples of like update this markdown file. It's not too bad.
Look that over. It seems fine to me. It's not controversial. I'm not sure in what context those rate tests are used, but I think, you know, how you plan on invoking them or you're just going to run those rate tests. Yeah. I just want to make sure that the methods are the same. Like maybe you are working but you don't plan to actually run those rate tests. Correct. I was just like, I removed the methods they were relying on, so I updated the method.
Okay, so the things I sort of captured from this, just to read my minutes aloud, right, are this question of how do we publicize features, and one of them is this desire to maybe get back to blog posts, maybe try and make really succinct things as part of our release process, maybe link to Zach's stuff, and maybe think about how to tie this back to the PR process, either as tags as something to do, or maybe encouraging people to stick a paragraph into the PR, or maybe encouraging people to write docs as part of the PR. All kind of potential directions to experiment with.
Just want to make a quick comment. As a person who's way better at writing documentation and blog posts than I am writing C code, I'd be willing to kind of help out here. But I think one thing that would be really helpful from my side is maybe having some action items from you as the developers going, hey, we have this new feature being rolled out. We'd really like to see something on this, and kind of giving some action items. And then I can kind of think in my head, hey, I could write a blog post, or hey, I could maybe get involved with writing documentation. I think that might be a little helpful, is kind of having an action items list. And I kind of know that's kind of like the release documents of what's changing, but maybe more specifically what you want blog posts or documentation on may be a little bit more helpful for people like me to get engaged.
Where would you like to see that request?
I don't really have a good idea for that. I was thinking Slack, to be honest, but I'm not really sure what the best place is. I was just kind of bringing this up as a discussion point that you want to drive that forward.
Is
Slack
there
might be a good place to kind of discuss it? I'm not really sure on the best place, to be honest. So
is there? I mean, you put your hand up.
Yeah.
So this is very much a question for where would you?
Yeah, I guess
Like
Slack
to
would be a
see
good
this.
place, or just in the meeting notes of, hey, we got some things coming out. It'd be really cool to see some blog posts or something like that. So
Would you want to see this in a? Do you think this fits an existing Slack channel? Should we try and create a new one, like community outreach or marketing or like writing? I
don't really have a good idea. I know I put up my hand and put myself in the firing line here, but I don't really have a good answer. But other than just having some action items on some things you'd like to see written would be helpful. I'm not really sure where the best place to put them.
Maybe we could have a tag on the pull requests called release notes or something like that, and people can contribute to that. Like if something is about to be merged and we think it needs additional documentation or something, we could put release notes on it, and then it's a big enough change for people to know about it. And
My question with that is who actually watches GitHub labels? Like would Ben actually subscribe to like a GitHub label and take action on that, or does it need a little bit more of a push mechanism like Slack?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think I'd be looking at GitHub labels, which is kind of why I brought this up. So
Yeah, so I think in my case, the label was more for like near release to figure out, okay, these are the things we want to highlight more than anything else. There's just a hint for us, if that makes sense.
This is for a specific org. I have no idea. I just do it on chat program. Doesn't bother the browser.
Well, so far Slack's, I think, to my ears, the best suggestion for how to link people contributing code with people willing to write.
I don't think it's a good answer. You're damned
So I don't know, maybe folks mull on that and we can create a channel or just try and use general. My gut sense is creating a channel is better, because then things kind of, I don't know, it feels like a topic that merits its own isolation. But I don't know, happy to kind of go with what people think on that one.
Hashtag release.
It
Sorry,
seems
what?
low volume enough to me, like wherever we do it's fine until it becomes an issue, and then we can maybe create it.
So conversely, low volume means that it gets lost in the noise, right? If someone said something, hey, I wrote this thing, can someone help me write a blog post? And then, you have like 3 people being like, how do I compile Osquery 3.6? Right?
Okay, true. Yeah, I mean, I see someone commented pound release notes, like works for me.
Sure, we'll try that. I'll go make that right now. Okay, pound release notes exists. Anyone want to chat about anything else in the how to publicize features direction?
When's the last time that we updated our website with community articles? Well,
I think it's a good answer, actually.
It used to be a place people could look. Maybe they haven't looked in a long time.
It's easy to update.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'll start posting. I've been publishing like a couple of things a week recently, and maybe I'll start adding some of those to the site.
I think we might have had an open issue around the time that we started the steering committee. We wanted to revive some of the blog posts that had originally been on the site. It was changed so that you had to sort of embed them, format them in Markdown, and then embed them directly. Whereas they used to be sort of just, it was like a links jumping off page. So you could link to a WordPress blog or something without as much trouble. Now I think because you have to rewrite things in WordPress, in Markdown, I think it's slowed down the contribution of articles. I mean, it's easy to write in Markdown, but if you've already written an article in some other format, then it is an extra step.
Is this actually true? Like, has it slowed down people contributing articles? Because there's sort of, like some of the things are really just like, here's an article, go read it somewhere else.
Yeah, maybe what we could expect or suggest people do is give it like an abstract and then a link, so that they don't have to rewrite too much. I know that, for instance, Trail of Bits has blogged about Osquery a lot in the last year or two, but we haven't put anything on this, communities section because, well, we just never got around to putting it in Markdown, basically.
I mean, a question I'd ask is, what's the point of that blog?
The Osquery blog?
Yep. And where I'm going with this is, so Trail of Bits writes content. Zach writes content. Presumably you both write content to further your own businesses, which is cool. So what's the purpose of having it on the Osquery blog? Is it to sort of make it look like the Osquery project is active? Is it to provide the links to this valuable content from people who read this blog and not just use the search? And maybe where I'm trying to get to this is whether this blog is just like, here's an abstract, go read it on the Trail of Bits site, versus something else that kind of maybe is influenced by what our goal is with it.
Well, from the perspective of Osquery itself, which I think is the right perspective to take in the office hours here, I think it aggregates information for Osquery users, and it does convey the activity and breadth of the user population. If multiple organizations are talking about Osquery and That might accelerate adoption because I know a lot of people look to other people when they consider whether to deploy something like Osquery. Oh, who else is using it? You know, oh, I see XYZ. Maybe Trail of Bits is not the most influential, but a big company, if they were blogging about it and we could include their blog, then that would go further, perhaps, to encourage people.
I mean, maybe it sort of just makes it all look more active in a way.
That too. Yeah, but I think there's a lot of Osquery deployments that people don't talk much about. We meet the customers at conferences. Oh, yeah, we have 10,000 nodes. Well, how come we've never heard about it? So if they were more highlighted or encouraged or something from the blog, we could even reach out to people. Hey, would you like to write about your Osquery experience? I mean, we've talked about interviewing. I think that was a previous office hour suggestion, right? Interviewing Osquery users.
Yeah.
So
just as a fellow blog writer, I use Twitter to kind of publicize a lot of my stuff. Maybe having something like a Twitter feed where you do hashtag like Osquery tutorial or Osquery blog post, and then like that just shows up in a feed. That might be one way to do it too. So it's not something you actively have to update, just pulling the latest things for a hashtag or something like that. So
yeah, is it safe to embed latest tweets from a certain account? I mean, we control the Osquery account on Twitter. Someone does, right?
yes.
We could just cross-post to the blog if we don't have to update it. If we don't have to push to get in order to update that part of it, I mean, is there like a Twitter embed frame we could just put in?
I mean, probably. But it sort of maybe goes back to this question of what are we getting out of it, and do these things meet the need? Because things like search semantics and SEO nonsense are really different on an embedded Twitter feed versus a full cross-published blog article versus a summary and link. So yeah. I kind of like the idea of publishing, a summary and a link to other people, because it's like the Planet style blog aggregation in a way of like, here's it's like there was a bunch of, I don't know, 5-10 years ago, a lot of the Linux operating systems would create like Planet foo websites or blog aggregations. So it was like Planet Debian or Planet Ubuntu or Planet Gentoo was like a kind of umbrella term for weird blog aggregation stuff that was happening.
All right. Was Zach the original author of the website code?
I believe the website code was written by a contractor for Collide.
Yeah, it wasn't me, but I've worked with it a little bit. I think it's not terribly hard to work with. If we can like spec out some things that need to be done, I can probably do that.
Yeah, I guess we don't have any open issues for the website in our repo. Thought we did.
My gut sense is the posting a summary and a link to other blogs is worth trying. Maybe it's low-hanging fruit at least. It still is a push to the website, but like if we find there's value, maybe we can smooth that a little bit. I don't know.
I just want to make another quick comment on the blog thing, since I just went there to kind of look. if we're trying to highlight like the community and everything, what's officially shown is the official blog post of like Osquery, and then there's another tab for community articles. So I thought that was kind of weird that if we're trying to highlight the community, that there's a whole nother tab that you have to kind of realize to click on to actually see that content. So that might be something to kind of think about, that if you're trying to drive more of what the community is doing with it, maybe just make it all one thing. I don't know. That's just kind of my feedback, because I didn't see that at first, that tab. So,
Or just default to that tab.
maybe just default to that tab.
I don't know, seems reasonable to me. I mean, I think it would be fine to default to a view that like showed both the official and community articles all intermingled. And, you know, if you only wanted to see the official ones, you could like clicky a thing.
I had a question about the documentation. I was wondering if there was any way to have the correct link show up in the README when you go back in time in a Git history. So if we were to browse the files of like 3.2.6, if there was a way to have a link to the 3.2.6 documentation inside the README and the contributing MD file. Because right now we have this kind of uncoupling between the documentation and the main repository. And I know there's a way to select which version in read the docs. I don't really know how, but I've seen a link once.
So I think that read the docs will give you things by version, but I don't know a way to have like a README automatically, like a README in GitHub automatically complete that. So it would have to be like potentially an item on a checklist somewhere. Or either we do something like just embed the link to the available versions in the README, you know, looking for old versions, go here, or possibly as part of a release checklist, we'd have to like make a link somewhere.
Yeah, I was wondering about this because the other day someone was trying to build the old Osquery version, and I completely removed how the old build system worked from my brain.
As you should. I would say probably the best we can do is just include something like looking for an older documentation set, click here. Because I found the read the docs link for that, so I can stick that into the minutes in the chat here if someone wants to PR that update.
Yeah, that would be really helpful.
So there's a couple of release-related items on our agenda, if people are done with documentation. So the couple of release-related items we have, so we released 4.2.0, and it's kind of been out for a little while, and maybe a question is, are we ready to push the Linux packages to the stable repos? I don't know if anyone's really tested the Linux packages yet.
You can find out if it is stable if you push it. People who made a mistake to, use that as a production repo will find out. I'm only half kidding.
I mean, I haven't much tested the packages, but the underlying binaries seem okay to me.
Yeah, same here. So you mentioned that the macOS package is kind of broken. And
yeah, that person filed an issue. It's missing the scripts. I haven't dug deeper than that, but it doesn't normally. It auto launches the agent because the launchd file gets loaded, and there's no post-install script in this package. All the files appear to be there in a payload, although it seems kind of weird the way the payload is organized. But
there's a good chance this is accidental. If I remember correctly, the way the code signing flow works is that Teddy gets a package, deconstructs it, signs it, and then reconstructs it. So there's a good chance this just got dropped somewhere and kind of hits the whole need to rework all of that. I started thinking about playing around with that. I don't really want to take up office hours because I feel like I can babble about it forever. I guess related to that a little bit, I don't know if this is interesting to anyone or not, but I'll mention it. I started trying to play with kind of building something vaguely inspect inspired to do sort of server and package verification. So based on the idea of launch a VM, install the Osquery package, and verify the output, sort of verify that it is as expected. And perhaps unsurprisingly, I'm tinkering with doing this by building a TLS endpoint, having it connect to the TLS endpoint. At some point, I'll send Groob some code to review, probably.
I started doing something like that when we were doing the 4.0 release, and things were just kind of unstable, and then I dropped it because I got busy. But sounds like a really good idea.
I have a beginning framework, and again, I'm really modeling this on the idea of like inspec or server spec, or there's a couple of other things in that space, which are all kind of about, can you define rules and then run them somewhere, and do they pass or fail? And the thing I started playing with is using Osquery and saying, okay, so an agent connects to my TLS server, get some distributed queries, they come back as JSON effectively, right? And you can run like JSON spec to verify them. So define query, define JSON spec, see if it matches. I feel a little bit like I'm recreating any one of the TLS frameworks to do, server verification or something with Osquery, but it's kind of fun. So I'll try and get that code a little bit better and see what Groob thinks of my go on that one.
I had a couple of questions about packaging since you are here and available. I spent some time on another project doing packaging for macOS and doing code signing via CMake, which was it wasn't hard. I used a custom command that calls the code sign tool, I have noticed that in order to sign applications, maybe because we have multiple artifacts, we have to create a bundle for it. So I think the process was to sign the executables and then sign the bundle, the .app folder. And I was wondering how this would work in Osquery and whether we should start implementing this. The work I've done is, it is really simple. I just added support for entitlements using a PNIST file and code signing through a custom command that uses a setting, a CMake setting, to specify which code sign identity to use.
There's a few different ways to do it. So one, the easy way is to have like a bundle. And Apple tends to favor many things in app bundles. But there's also a way of like embedding all your entitlements and everything during the code sign process with like LD flags. So you can actually just append a lot of that stuff to the binary itself, and then the system respects it. It's kind of dark magic, and there's not a lot of good resources on it. But for example, for Objective-C binaries.
As far as I know, so I'd ask this a little bit differently, which is to say, what does an app bundle get us? And I think, as I understand it, the things you can do with an app bundle are like, if you have an if you have a graphical interface where something you want users to double click, you basically have to be in an app bundle. Doesn't matter anything else, but like if you have fundamentally a UI-driven double clicky thing, that's the thing.
Only thing. So like,
yes, but I'm starting there.
Right. So like if you, for example, if you're playing with custom app schemes, like just which are intended for GUI apps, but they don't necessarily, like if you want to receive events that system sends you to a specific thing, you have to register it, and the registration happens by appending stuff into an info plist file. So like, where does the info plist file live? It lives in a specific app bundle structure and so on. And a lot of the TCC permissions and things like that that Apple has been looking at break if you don't have like an associated info plist. And so I really wish there was somebody who really knew this stuff really well, but
it's not
observation.
It's not consistent because we're also seeing reports like you can ship an info.plist next to a Mako binary and it will like just work, which is like kind of batshit weird, right? But it appears to be true. So again, I guess what I'm trying to get to is, I do not think right now we need an app bundle. Like one of the things that I also think an app bundle is good for is if you ship multiple binaries that all sort of need to coordinate across like an event framework, like the Apple notification and event frameworks, they all have to be in the same bundle. Or potentially if you're shipping entitlements, though as far as I know, the only entitlement that is really interesting to Osquery is full disk access, which you can't code sign in. That's the one that users have to grant that by some process.
Actually, I've been looking at this recently. Endpoint security entitlement would be very interesting for us. We would like to get that. It does require you to ship a provisioning profile alongside your binary, which is more convenient if you have an app bundle.
Also, I think the endpoint security thing will only load from an app bundle. Like you have to, the Senta team, I've been chatting with them and they had some issues with this and filed feedback with Apple, but
I've been working with an Apple engineer last week, actually, and the latest is that it doesn't require an app bundle if you're not shipping a system extension, but they strongly recommend you do it because it's kind of obnoxious to not package your thing as a system extension. But there's directions I could paste later if anyone's interested on how to create like the minimal, least bundled kind of distribution of your endpoint security entitled app. But you do end up having several files, which have to be in a directory structure that looks like an app.
Might be a reason. Like if people wanted to start playing with the endpoint security framework and then required us to ship .app, then maybe we would start shipping a .app.
I guess I was also asking more about the technical issue here. I don't really know much about the Mac-O format, so I was wondering if where the actual signature ends up when you do not have a .app bundle. If it is a resource inside the binary, like a portable executable, or just something like an extended attribute on a fast system that you risk losing if you copy the Osquery binary on a fast system that does not support this kind of data. So this is what was why I was asking.
I know it's not an extended attribute.
Okay.
No, it's embedded into the binary.
Yeah. I'll send you a
Nice.
link to this. There's a sect create flag which you can use to embed a lot of this information with LD. I'll find the relevant link and add it on Slack.
So is there a value in trying to add initial support without a bundle with CMake?
Initial support for what?
Signing the binary without a bundle.
Well, the question is, what are we trying to get? Like, we talked a little bit about endpoint security framework, but like, what concrete tables or frameworks are
Signing is not the only thing you need for entitlements. You have to have a provisioning profile and an entitlements file, which can bind, build into a binary that's signed, but with an embedded provisioning profile, which is a file that has to ship alongside in a structure of directories that look like an app at the least, but are recommended to use an app bundle.
I thought entitlements just got baked into the binary in the code sign step.
They do, but this is what I've learned in the last week of frustration. You have an entitlements file that specifies what you need, but you also have a provisioning profile, which has to have the rights to these entitlements. So those have to both be in the binary as a code signature and an embedded provisioning profile. The term provisioning profile, I believe, is just like a public cert. And the public cert has to be granted by Apple the right to these entitlements. And then there's additional requirements like needing root in order to actually use endpoint security. That's not an issue for us. We're running Osquery as root generally. But it is more than just a code signature. And if you only have a code signature, you will not be able to run on other people's machines without SIP disabled.
That is
Okay.
correct.
So sort of to split this a little bit, endpoint security requires provisioning profiles, which require app bundles. At least
Well, yeah, or at least the structure of an app bundle.
as we understand it right now.
Yeah.
The question, going back, is this just about adding endpoint security, or are we trying to fix some other functionality within Osquery? Or
Looks like
what
the file system is denied partially by Catalina. Is that right?
right, but that's
Full disk.
by just granting Osquery full disk access, right? Like, if you give
Yeah,
it
your
access
app bundle doesn't help you with that.
all disk directories.
I was suggesting to start with to do it in 2 different steps. So initially, without any bundle, just to kind of replace the complex procedure that we have to go through.
I don't think it solves that problem, and that's what I want to highlight.
Okay.
So as I think about it, an app bundle is just a different way of packaging an application, right? Like right now, we ship things in a PKG. We could ship it as a .app in a DMG. And without talking about bringing in things like a provisioning profile, these are, 10,000 feet fundamentally the same. It's just a different container for shipping data around.
It's
The
literally
question
a directory with a file extension.
Sorry,
is
what?
there are certain things that have to be packaged in a specific way for Apple to allow you to like load specific frameworks or to give you data through events and things like that.
Right,
which,
but if we don't bring that in, then there's no semantic difference.
right, so that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, what are we bringing into Osquery? Like, what functionality that then requires this stuff?
But so I think Alessandro was saying a slightly different thing. Even before that, even before the talk about app bundles, I think he wanted to introduce a way to avoid having Teddy avoid to, for instance, extract and sign and then reconstruct the PKG, because we can introduce the code signing step of the binaries in CMake, and CPAC itself support then signing the packages.
So I think that's tackleable, and I think that's a very different question than whether we ship an app bundle.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of reasons we haven't really pulled signing into the CPAC process yet. One of them is that the signing certs are still the Facebook signing certs for reasons that are, I don't know, I need to get us a DUNS number, and the Linux Foundation is being remarkably slow in helping on that, and I'm probably going to time out pretty soon. So that's like one issue. Another issue is that in various conversations we've had, we've been unsure of whether we want to include fundamentally access to the signing keys in the same CI scope that everything else runs in. So there's sort of a little bit of a question of like, do you want the master builds that are happening in the Osquery repo to have access to the underlying Osquery signing keys, or do those need to be segregated? And if they're segregated, how do we talk about having that interface work? I created a repo but didn't actually write any code called packaging scripts, and the intent was, what would it be like to put all the CPAC and signing code into the packaging scripts repo? Does this actually get us anything? So I've kind of been circling a little bit in my head on that. So I feel like some of the issues around, oh, well, how can we have CPAC own more of this packaging and signing process are valid and good questions, and we should be kind of working towards that, either through a couple of the tickets we have where we've brainstormed ideas. But I don't think like, oh, we can't ship the PKG. That's not, the app bundle or PKG is sort of like, it's a different ball of wax. Sorry, does that make sense to people?
Yeah, it does.
The thing I want to do as like a piece of this that I started working on is I would love master builds of CI to produce zip or tar files of the resultant binaries and ship them into a bucket somewhere. And then we can use that as a jumping off point for signing and packaging. And I got a little bit tangled up writing Terraform to create buckets for us so we could have that process effectively just encoded and documented. So I will try and loop back and finish that work so we can then have somewhere to have CI throw binaries that we can then kind of iterate from. Mostly this was a thing that kind of at least a handful of us thought was an okay starting point in some tickets. If people want to talk about a different direction, we can do that. That's kind of what I'm slowly trying to get to. And yeah, if you think we need an app bundle to do endpoint security, that's a compelling reason to start making app bundles.
Well, there are many things you can do with that endpoint security framework. It is really neat. And you can also not just access notifications about things, but also authorize them.
Well, and since OpenBSM is going away, that'll be the way that we get file system events and whatever in newer versions.
That is true. The downside is, as Mike has mentioned, is that developers from that point on will always have to disable SIP and self-sign everything they want to run.
Well, they could use a developer ID certificate to do local testing, I believe, without disabling SIP. I think it won't be notarized and it won't be able to run on other machines without their profile loaded, but that's to be expected. The binary build that we make will have to be the official one people run if they want to use it.
Well, or they'll just roll their own. Like I may well always roll my own here. I don't know yet.
Yeah, there could be a collide signed version if you have the provisioning profile correctly entitled. Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of a, I haven't worked through that for collide yet, so we don't have an, I don't have an answer.
I'm still.
Well, so Apple has to issue basically the provisioning profile. It's not going to be as bad as trying to get a kernel extension signing profile, but Apple does have to approve each one for anyone who wants to sign the Osquery binary to do or to hook into the endpoint security framework, from my understanding.
That's my understanding too. Has anybody here been entitled or given that entitlement?
I had applied for it. I haven't received anything because I don't have any history of the kernel extension, and that was 3 months ago.
So do you think they want to only allow big companies with established business lines to do endpoint security work?
I don't know. So my account has been a paid member for a few years, and I wasn't using it, so I dropped it off, and then I picked it up again. And I don't really have a point of contact, and I kind of gave up on it. I can just disable SIP and do my own thing for experimentation. But I think the point is, like, if you are a big name or known legal entity, then I think it's easier than an individual developer.
Yeah. Well, I heard a couple of people complaining because they didn't have any timeline from Apple. It seems like a risk. If you want the entitlement, you have to somehow merit that, and then you have to wait for them to be, I don't know, willing.
I mean, I don't imagine that mainline would have much trouble with that, presuming that the DUNS number from the Linux Foundation, whatever else comes through. But
Yeah,
individual developers, yeah.
Sounds like there's just a lot of unknowns here.
To the extent that I can relay or convey my experience with this, since I'm trying to do this as an internal experiment for something unrelated to Osquery, I can share that learning.
I look forward to seeing it.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
So I think there's, so I took some notes on this discussion about app bundles. My conclusion was that it's not clear we need one, but the endpoint security is a compelling reason and may eventually drive this. I think there's also kind of an obvious set of bugs around the macOS packaging that let it become broken. The other two items on the agenda, I wanted to mention that someone on Slack asked if we had a due date on the 4.2.1 release. And I declared May 1st, which was 2 months after we released 4.2.0, sticking with the 2-month cadence. So if no one has any objections, I'll just leave that as is. And then the other question here was what to do with the 4.2.0 release and what do we need to do to feel like the Linux stuff is stable enough to push.
Well, yeah, we need to have someone, try it and relay if they had some issues. At least someone with some deployments. But yeah, I don't know how we did how we did last time. The last times, I think we only controlled ourselves basically.
I mean, I could probably spin up some VMs and just see if the service is starting. So if that's valuable, I can take a quick pass at that.
I also got to go. I have another meeting. So
Okay, Goodbye, Trail of Bits people.
Now I guess Stefan can stay a little longer.
That's everything I think we've got. So if we want to call this, thank you all for your time. Guess any trailing items?
I think that is all from me.
I'm good.
Good. Okay.
All right, guys.
Thank you,
so much
everyone.
for listening.
Bye.
Bye.